Hey everybody, Dr. Pedram Shojai back with the Health Bridge. We are here with Dr. Sarah Gottfried. Hi, Sarah.
Hey, Pedram. Hi, everybody.
Hey, so we've got a good buddy of ours on the show today. He is a hoot. We're going to have a lot of fun today. We have some structure set up, but I'm pretty sure we'll blow right through it and just start riffing because we have a lot of fun with him. Michael Lovich, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me. So I am not a health professional, so this is going to be fun.
No,
the Health Bridge.
Yeah, exactly.
I can make up anything I want because I have no license. I can do whatever I want. I can say what. I can't be sued. I'm just a lay person.
So he represents the internet at large. And so just for you guys to know,
right.
Mike is one of the principals of a company called Real Dose Nutrition, which is wonderful stuff. They have the best stuff out there because the whole point is here's what the studies say and this is what the efficacious dose is on this thing. So we're going to put in what you need so that you get the results that you need. And so I bet you have terrible margins, but you sleep well at night.
Pretty much. It's a lot of work, low margins, but yeah, we feel good about what we do, for sure.
Fantastic. So we have Sarah and I were kind of going back and forth about what we're going to talk about today. I think we're going to have a lot of fun because you've been on this thing and you've been kind of on the research tip on this thing of looking at, positive versus negative psychology and what that means and how people are being influenced in the market and how to maybe look at this differently. So I'd love for you to kind of just tease out what that is, and then we're going to have some fun with you.
Sure, because before I used to be involved with publishing psychologists, and that's really kind of my passion is the unconscious mind without the woo-woo, because I hate that. And it was actually your best friend, Dr. Michael Yang, who kind of reinvigorated me a couple months ago because I knew all this stuff, but then he validated it, and he's very trustworthy. And it's like all of a sudden I was like, why am I not paying attention to this anymore? And I kind of started to distrust it a little bit, just like anybody else does. So Michael Yang and I talked, and all of a sudden he made me allowed me to be more passionate about this stuff. So I've dived back in, and it's kind of interesting, scary stuff. I mean, so the big, and I'm kind of driven by pet peeves. So, one of the pet peeves I have is when everybody tells me to think positive or look on the bright side, and you see that in self-help, you see that almost everywhere. Happy people are healthier. Just think positive. You're going to kill yourself if you think negative. You just hear that in the literature, and even when people are trying to console you, or just among friendship kind of circles, or even in health masterminds where people should know better, they're saying this stuff, right? And just happy, feel good. And one thing I've been reading a lot, and Michael Yang was talking about, is that for some people that's absolutely true. So it's not one size fits all. For some people, they're called strategic optimists, and that's what they are. And it's a little over half the population. That kind of advice is actually good. Get after it. Set your goals, have big dreams. Don't let the stuff get in your way. Go, right? And those people can be successful, but they're not the only people that are. On the other end of the spectrum, go nuts.
Yeah, Michael, I want to poke some holes in this idea first because I'm curious about what evidence you have. I feel like you and my husband might be tied in terms of the power of negative thinking and the waiting for the other shoe to drop. Mm-hmm. But I want you to poke some holes in the data that we have. This idea, for instance, that the positive emotions, gratitude, forgiveness, that it actually raises your oxytocin, for instance, or it, creates this really happy spiral into your brain chemistry. Right. So poke some holes in it for us.
Right, I'm kind of listening to you. Well, gratitude is totally different. So being thankful for people and things is nothing to do with positive thinking. And so the research on gratitude, compassion, it turns out if you look at a lot of the research, compassion, especially when they combine compassion with mindfulness, super powerful. Gratitude, super powerful. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about kind of a Pollyannish, set your goals, think big, ignore the negative. Like let's look at like the law of attraction. That's what first got me angry about this. They even said that if you think about negative things, you will attract negative things. You remember all that?
Yes.
Don't think about it. So that's what I'm talking about.
You're talking about The Secret, right? I mean, that's basically
but even Tony Robbins, even just positive thinking in general, don't think negative. Don't think negative. I'm not talking about gratitude and compassion is huge. And that's actually really interesting. The new literature on that is just phenomenal because it turns out when they train people on self-esteem versus compassion, compassion wins on all kinds of health markers.
Why is that,
So
Michael? Why is that?
I have no idea. I personally, this is again, I'm a lay guy because I'm more of a synthesis guy who reads a lot and I can talk out of my ass. So, because that's what I do. Is
That's what we love most about you.
I think it's because it's more social. And that's a whole nother thing I've been reading on. And also, like my graduate degree was in communication sciences rhetoric, so I always looked at things from a social point of view. And the myth of this individual is just crazy because we are so social. And what's cool is all the new neuroscience out about that, and we have social parts of our brains, and that's what really led to our evolutionary advantage was our socialness. So this myth of this rugged individual, it's just, in my opinion, just crap. But you hear it all the time, especially kind of on the right wing side or even on the internet. Well, Steve Jobs even with the, follow your own dreams, screw everybody else, be a maverick. Hate that word because we'll never do it alone, and we're wired not to do it alone. So I think compassion, self-compassion, and compassion for others, it just makes more evolutionary sense. If I had to guess, I have no idea like the real science reason as to why, but it makes intuitive sense to me based on everything else I've studied.
What's funny is I know a lot of people that are kind of on the Christian side of the equation, and they hate The Secret because they think it comes from the devil, right? And for me,
I think it does.
It very well might because it's spiritual materialism at its finest, right? It's like
right.
I'm going to manifest a yacht and put some models on it, and this is my life, and I'm going to move away. And it's not consistent with the reality. That means going back and digging into the pains and the suffering that a lot of us have had inflicted on us as children, and kind of growing through that instead of moving past that and ignoring it, which is kind of a hallmark of our culture and all the get rich quick and weight loss schemes that you see on the internet.
Ignoring pain is the worst thing somebody can do. I mean, and that's another thing. I want to talk about Sarno stuff too, because that's the two things that Mr. Yang got me kind of back into, and they're just so cool, and they go together. So yeah, ignoring pain is the wrong thing. Life is painful. Like you see evolution. I mean, being an organism on Earth is this dog eat dog, man. It's a crazy, crazy thing, and you just watch wildlife. I mean, it's beautiful in one thing and ugly in another, and that's what we are. And being human is ugly and beautiful and everything in between. And to ignore all that, and so it's stunningly beautiful, but it's also horribly depressing. And to ignore the depressing part is just, to me, silliness, and it's Pollyannish, and also if you look at the data, it's not healthy for you or for your people around you. I love that spiritual materialism because every religion has that too. Like, there's some Christians who are totally, give, but then there's the like Joel Osteen Christian, which is borrowed from Tony Robbins, which is the same thing. And it's like, yeah, I was always thinking, like, I played football in high school, and we'd have, like, we're in Kansas, and so of course we'd want God to be on our side, and I was like, man, he must be busy on Friday nights. I mean, like, it's crazy. And why, whether it's God or some spiritual entity, why would they care about whether you won a football game, or why would they care if you had a Bentley? Like, it just doesn't make sense. Why would any spiritual, whatever your thing is why would it give a shit whether you have a new car or not, or have a new house? That's not what you think. If there is a universal force, and who knows, that's not what you think it would be interested in. It just doesn't make sense.
Interesting. Hey, I want to circle back to this point you made about compassion. I'm really interested in this. And yeah. I just was reading an interview with Jack Kornfield where he was talking about how when he was part of this group that was bringing Buddhism to the West, he really saw this gap between the Eastern practitioners of Buddhism and the Western practitioners of Buddhism in terms of their ability to have self-compassion.
Okay.
And he felt like, we need some extra loops to help people with the self-hatred, the self-loathing. Talk about that. Like, is that part of our cultural heritage in the West? Like, how do you think about that? Is that one of the reasons why compassion wins over building self-esteem?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, my Buddhist knowledge is like more just read. Like, I still try to meditate and I can't do it. So like, take that with a grain of salt. So I'm a big fan of it, but more from the outside. So I can't say I'm practicing, although I've attempted to. But back to that, the literary, all I can say is this lady's out of Austin. I need to get her name. Maybe later I can send you it because I've just been reading all her research. But she's out of UT. And yeah, I think I don't know. The people tend to it's Puritan. I mean, all I can say, I can just give you the knee-jerk answer, the puritanical, self-effacing, give that maybe we're just guilt-ridden that way, or for whatever reason. There's a million, the Catholic tradition, the Jewish tradition, that kind of thing, where maybe they're lacking on, the compassion for self, which is huge, because you have to forgive yourself as well. And you have to understand, so it's more about, like, the difference between that and this whole self-esteem crap, because that's actually been reversed a lot. Like California redid their whole educational system to increase self-esteem based on a lot of Virginia Satir's work. And a lot of it completely backfired and created spoiled kids who can't handle anything. So the self-esteem without backup just doesn't work, because it's like entitlement, and then these people can't handle the real world. And it's like, don't mess with my self-esteem. It's like, sorry, I'm going to have to. So the compassion is stronger, because it's understanding yourself, and that's what it just makes more sense too. But I don't have the literature.
It sounds like some of it is awareness. Like, it's that awareness. I mean, isn't that, Pedram, you and I talk about awareness all the time, that it's sort of the tipping point when it comes to really making a difference with your health, perhaps with compassion versus the self-esteem building. That, it's interesting to hear the data from you, Michael, about how self-esteem is, the data's not looking so good.
No. That's the thing. Self-esteem only works when you deserve it. I've talked to a lot of guys about, because I've talked to some friends, like a guy named Todd Herman, for example. He works with real Olympic athletes. Like, he doesn't work with, bullshit people. And it's like, yeah, the worst thing they can do if they're prepared when they're not. The worst thing they can do is tell themselves when they're not ready. So these guys, athletes who really compete, and let's face it, most of us can't really split test our, mental training out in the real world. These guys, it's really all about mental. At a certain, at the end of the day, that's mental for that last 0.11%, whether they win the gold or the silver or the bronze. And so, because the last thing you can do is have them think they're great when they're not. It's a killer. They have to know where they are. So that's kind of a good analogy of why some of this self-esteem thing doesn't work. Now, there's another thing like ego state training, which is a little different, which is having a strong, healthy ego, which doesn't necessarily say I'm great. It's having a strong ego. That's more increasing your sense of self, which is very important, and that's different than self-esteem, although there's a correlation. Does that make sense?
Oh God, this hits me really close to home, because I'm in the martial arts. The second place person has a bloody nose, right? They don't get a trophy, right. and so we had this with my cousin the other day. So, the kids team lost. Right, but they got trophies too, because they're trying to build their self-esteem. I said, well, how about you try playing harder next time? What did you do wrong? Right. How can you be a better performer in your craft? And in the martial arts, it's just a joke. And then you have certain schools of thought, like some of these Taekwondo studios, which is pay to play. It's like, oh, I've been there 2 months. My daddy paid his checks. I got another stripe, and now I'm an orange belt.
It's a stripe,
yeah, and it's complete bullshit.
Yeah, I'm in Boulder, and it's crazy. Like, we were in Texas, and my kid played soccer. And if you lost, you lost, And then in Boulder, when we got her in, there was like, you could be 1 in 10 and everybody gets a trophy for, I don't know what for, showing up. So I'm not for that. I mean, and obviously there's a limit. Everything's a spectrum, because if you take anything, it's like constant imperative. You take anything to its extreme, it sucks. I'm sure we could take compassion, and that could get really wacky if we just went nuts with it, right? So there's a certain balance there. I don't know what it is, but it seems to be out of whack, at least in kind of the more bouldery places in the country. It's a little out of whack, and I'm not saying like where I grew up in Kansas, it was brutal the opposite way. I'm not saying that was great. I mean, it was very much sink or swim, and coaches yelling at you and making you pay injured and all that. That was a little much too. So I don't know where the balance is, but it's definitely, I think, skewed weirdly now in a crazy direction.
So Michael, I want to talk a bit more about mindset, because you said something provocative to me over the last couple of days. You came to Berkeley. We were super excited to visit with you. And we were heading out for dinner.
Uh-oh.
And we were talking
heavily. I hate it when I drink with people who interview me later. I'm like, what did I say?
Well, some things will stay in Berkeley. Let's just put it that way. Good. So we were talking about my liver versus your liver, and this gong that Pedram and I are on. And you were saying something interesting about how your mother used to put brewer's yeast on your pasta. Like, you grew up with this very integrated, holistic mother who kept you healthy and kind of got you started on some supplements really early. And then you also were giving me a kind of mind over matter argument about your liver and your liver function. So tell us about that.
Like, I'm a sample size of 1. So again, you have to know this. So like, I go get my, and I don't particularly like. I'm not a health nut. I mean, I was raised with supplements and all that, and I've gone through healthy periods, but it's just not my priority. I always thought, until the shoe drops, then I'll clean up my act. But I'm more, like I'd rather live shorter, but have a way more packed in. I'm not going to spend my whole life trying to be healthy and not have the kind of fun I like to have, within reason. I mean, I do healthy things at home, like you said, I eat right. But yeah, if you looked at what I eat and how much I drink and do other things, probably not the best. But every time I go get a test from the doctor, and I'm real honest with my doctor about what I do, my hormones are great, my cortisol is great, my liver enzymes are great, and then I smoke and I drink sometimes. I have pulmonary tests every year. My lungs are better than average for my age. All this stuff, and then again, I don't want people to say go do that and just have this crazy mindset, and it's not positive. It's like very social. And so the research on that is like, and again, I was trying to find it in front of me. Like, did a study at BYU, and like being lonely is more dangerous than smoking, and it makes biological sense if you just looked at the way we are evolved. Because obviously, I believe in evolution. The theory is that when you're needed, social. So when people like need you, you're valuable to the tribe, right? And if you feel that you're valuable to the tribe in a real meaningful way, it just helps you with health. I'm not saying it erases bad things. Again, I don't want to put that out there. Obviously, the best thing is to do it all. However, there is a huge, and they're still researching it, a huge component of health that is social. And a lot of the things that are bad for you, like smoking, drinking, are also very, very social. Like drinking alone is the worst thing. Like I have a rule: I'll never drink or do anything alone. Like it's hard and fast, because that to me is like, that's scary. So never, I don't even have a glass of wine alone, ever alone, because that's kind of in my mind. I'm like, that's pathetic. Why would you do that? So to me, those are social lubricants. But so it's a balance there, right? But yeah, so I'm a thing. But there are a lot of research studies showing that. I think even Gladwell covered it in Outliers about that. That village where they ate this crap, but they lived to be 100. So there's a lot of examples of this. There still needs, again, still needs to be more research. But I'm a big believer, and the more I study things, the more it makes sense that that it's true.
So can we talk about the Puritans and health? Because Sarah and I have been dancing around this a little while, and it's tough because like you like to have a good time. I love hanging out with you because we have a really good time together.
Great time.
We have a great time, and we play basketball and run around and do whatever. But we enjoy life, and we try to pull Sarah in, and she tries to behave a lot more than we do. But
she's getting there.
She's getting there. But like the health thing, a lot of people are put off by the health thing because health nuts and these health people end up being so overboard and puritanical and judgmental about what they eat, how they do it, that they're like pure for 6 days of the week, and then one day a week they're like hiding in like a corner eating cheesecake. And so it seems like that's kind of the flip side of this whole thing too, is even when we're trying to be healthy, it's all or nothing. And we talked about this, Sarah. It's like, gray is kind of where the fun happens, right? And it's too black and white. And I'd love to kind of tease that out with you guys.
What's interesting to me though is like we had a person in our mastermind, Sarah, the other day, and like I was like, how'd you get into this? And I had buddies too, and they were just really sick. Right. And so there's also,
Right.
so that's different. I just want to, first of all, before I say anything, like that's to me different, because I've never had that, nor has anybody in my family. So it's, that's different to me. And so, so that's one, I think that's a subset of some people who've gone crazy, and that'd be hard to justify why not to do that. Something happened early or whatever, the wrong foods or the wrong whatever to their genetic disposition or however it works. And then they, had a health crisis. They come out of it. They feel wonderful. I'm not going to speak to that group, because I don't understand. I understand it, I think, but that I would never want to tell that person that that's weird, because it's not weird. I think if I ever have that and I go on a diet and I get better and I feel great, I'll probably be crazy too. Because it's just understandable, right? So I don't want to talk about those people that way, because I think it would be unfair. But yeah, but then the other kind of health, it's a culture. I don't know, because actually people I hang around in general aren't like that. So I look at them from afar, and I haven't given it that much thought, to be quite honest, as to why they're like that. I don't know whether it's social or whether it's, we all know about identity. It's now become cool, like the CrossFitters and all the, and I think that could be good in the sense that it's social. So I think what CrossFit and the Tough Mudders and all that group, they're now kind of hanging out together, and they run together, they work out together. So in a sense, if that's so I've chosen to be social at bars, and they've chosen to be social that way. It could be the best of both worlds if it's satisfying that need. Now maybe we get put off by it because maybe we feel bad because we're not like that. I don't know. There is a social component, which is cool, and that makes sense too. So if you're lonely, but you can go join your marathon group, well, now you're being healthy and you're getting this social need thing. So I think that's actually, I don't think it's a bad thing. I would never join it, but but that's me. You know what I'm saying? Everybody's different that way, but I don't think it's unhealthy. Or people going to yoga, that's also very social. That's pretty cool. Or have you done with qigong and the martial arts? That's neat. I did some of that growing up, and that was very bonding and very healthy. Not just for the martial arts; it's more about hanging out with the guys in the studio.
Yeah, it's really healthy until you pull your shoulder out because you
Right.
are insisting on staying up on things. So like anything else, awareness, right? It seems to always come back to that. Like your involvement in this group isn't predicated on your ability to kip 6 more times. It's
Yeah.
and we lose that, and then we compromise our health in an activity that's supposed to enhance it, and then we're out for 6 weeks, and then we start eating Doritos.
Right. That's what Jackie Wicks was talking about. I just went to her book signing, and she was talking about how 6% of those people are ready for it. They did it slow. They built up a foundation, and they don't get hurt. It's more the jumping in too fast, right? Because I think you could do that if you take your time and end up doing that well if you were patient, which isn't my forte. But building a foundation, but most people, they get in, and the peer pressure to do that and meet these things, their foundation, their body foundation isn't there yet. Their ligaments aren't strong enough, all kinds of stuff. Their chain, the posterior chain isn't healthy enough to do some of this stuff, so they hurt themselves. But if you do develop that, you can do it safely. That makes sense. So those people don't bug me as much. It's kind of, if they do it, they do it.
So I want to circle back to this point you made about the social connection and how loneliness is as bad for you as smoking. It makes me think of the Whitehall studies where they found that people who have an altered stress response, like a really heightened stress response, and they have burned out adrenals or adrenal dysregulation, that's as bad for you as smoking. And so I want to circle back to mindset. You and I were talking yesterday in the car, Michael, about mindset, and I think that it really influences adrenal function, like the cortisol numbers that you're talking about with your lab draw. And Pedram, you and I have talked about this separately, sort of the control system for your stress response, the hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis. I think that's where really mindset comes in first and foremost in terms of influencing health. What do you think about that, Michael?
I honestly can't say I know the details on mindset and like cortisol. I mean, my gut feel would be the more connected, the more relaxed you are, the better that's going to be. But also cortisol is weird because half the people who think they're high cortisol don't have enough.
Right.
And so everybody, even us, my company's a little guilty of this, is that lower your cortisol causes belly fat, blah 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 blah, and that's true for some people, and that's stress. But burnout, you don't have enough cortisol. So you feel like crap, right? And so I don't think enough people are talking about that. And as far as mindset and the cortisol connection, again, like I could make guesses, but I don't know. Again, I'm not the medical doctor there, so I know enough to be dangerous right there.
Well, that's exactly why we want you to comment on it.
Well, I do, so I don't know. I mean, I do, again, I think it's more connection than attitude.
Yep. Well, even the person who's tanked on cortisol, what got you there is really the problem, right? And it's your mindset, your interface with your reality, right? And our stress response is so predicated on our perception of reality more so than anything. And so that's where the hard science really crosses over into the psychology, and the hard science of the psychology, and then crosses over into a lot of the woo-woo, which is, wow, it really is about how I look at my world, and it really is about how I interface with things, my social connections and all that. And that person who's, at home considering drinking alone, they are isolated. They're doing things that are bad for them, and chances are their adrenals are also suffering. And it's on a line item basis, obviously, but these things are all so interconnected that this is the type of conversation that needs to be had about it. You can't segment it out without understanding the global reality of it all.
Right. And a lot of it's stress avoidance, because also we hear another bad word that isn't a bad word is stress. So the idea of not being stressed is ridiculous. Life is about stress. Stress is good. Stress is a natural thing. It's whether you tackle it, whether you go straight ahead with it, or whether you avoid it. Avoiding it's the worst thing you can do. So a lot of people, and again, I think more on the positive side, will try to just act like it's not happening. Oh no, happy, happy, feel good. This really isn't happening. Life is really good. It's not bad. I'm going to ignore the negative stuff. They're not even facing stress. Stress makes you stronger as long as you don't let it overwhelm you, right? So that's a choice. And also it's a choice of seeing reality. We'll never see reality. I think we all know that. Like reality, none of us, at least I know I can't. I don't know what reality is, but I try my hardest to see it as much as I can. It's impossible always. We're always going to make distortions to like increase our self-image and all that kind of thing. But you try to minimize the distortions so that you can kind of exist in a real world, and that's very, very healthy. And let me circle back to I started out with the defensive pessimists versus the strategic optimists. So check this out. This is what's so cool. So I said, they were right when it comes to the people who are strategic optimists. It is kind of, they'd rather see the big goal and go get it. And they did this experiment with darts, where with the people who had taken a survey which showed them to be optimists, just imagine hitting that bullseye. So just focus everything, get away of everything, just hit that bullseye, right? For the 60% of the people who are optimists, that actually made them shoot the dart better. For the people who were labeled as defensive pessimists, it ruined them. Absolutely ruined their performance. It's destroyed it. So what a defensive pessimist does is they first see all the bad things that could happen. Because defensive pessimists tend to have a little more anxiety than optimists, a little bit more, which is fine. And so in order to overcome that, in order for them to perform, what they go through all the worst case scenarios. Like, what if the dart, hits the bartender? All that stuff that the law of attraction will say, oh, you're going to cause that by thinking it. No, it increases their performance. And the funny thing is, when an optimist tries to do that, it hurts it. So what you have is two kind of, we can slice and dice personality all you want. In this particular slice, you have a very different methodology for success. And so when you go to your friend, you just look on the bright side, you can kind of tell is more of a defensive pessimist type. You're not helping them. You're hurting them. So that's kind of cool, right? And both of them can lead very happy lives. Both of them can have gratitude. Both of them can have self-compassion. It's just different strategies for an event, right? Which is pretty cool. And they've done this across the board now. They've done it with rowing teams. They've done it with darts. And so it's across the board, which is really, really cool. And it says that, again, this kind of knee-jerk, one-fits-all advice for success is also something that needs to change. So we're causing people who, I think, in like the Oriental societies, defensive pessimism is the norm, right? So they're taught that. That's cool. Like if you look at they had studies on, I forget which country, but one of the Eastern countries versus American kids, and the kids all thought they would kick ass on this math test. Where the Orientals were like, no, I'm going to fail. Well, look at the real scores. The Orientals kicked our ass, right? So that's more their culture. So this culture of confidence is not helping performance. That's kind of the big thing there. And that's really, and to me, it's fascinating as all get out. I mean, and it's just started. I mean, that's Julie Norum is the kind of leading researcher on the whole thing, because she's a defensive pessimist and she just couldn't stand. She was like, this couldn't be right, and she's the one doing this. So she has the positive power of negative thinking is her book, and so if you want to go deep into that, she's the queen there.
That's fantastic.
It's just, you start combining that with other studies on this all kinds of stuff. It starts to make a lot of sense, and you start combining that with like Sarno's work, which is this batshit. Then it starts to be a very interesting world out there. And the cool thing is, like social neuroscience is a new field, right? Like that's 10 years old. There's all these cool fields and all these cross disciplines happening now. So we live in this amazing time, which is great for learning new things, but also awful because everything we're figuring out will be proven wrong in a couple of years now. It used to take 20 or 30 years to be wrong. Now it's like we're going to keep being wrong faster. Can we deal with that?
That's just good science.
Good science is faster now, though, which is cool. Cool, and also, you have to stay current or you're going to say the wrong things, which is always trouble.
So is there an analysis tool that our listeners can do to determine whether, I'm pretty sure if you're listening to this, you already know which side of that fence you land on, whether you're an optimist or pessimist, but is there some sort of survey or something we could chuck up on the Facebook page?
In that book, she has one. In that book that I mentioned, and basically we're doing a podcast now, you can put the link. She has that. Maybe we could scour one out, whether she has one online or not.
Cool. Okay, so
she has a survey. She has the pre-survey material in there.
We'll put that on Facebook.com/thehealthbridge, and Lorenzo.
I want to see you guys interview her, because I'm more like I'll go deep enough there, and then I'll go over here, and then and have some fun. It's the other thing I just want to before we hit it is the psychosomatic stuff on pain or on stuff and what Sarno's done, like that to me fits in this weird way because the cause of pain in his research, it's pretty much repression. So it's not the trauma, right? It's not the negative thing. It's denying something you don't want to deal with. So it's back to this whole a la positive thinking thing, right? So it's basically, your body saying, your brain saying, you're not ready to hear this. And so to distract you from hearing this, I'm going to deprive a certain body part of oxygen. And it's real pain, right? That's being caused by repressing anger. And it basically boils down to being angry about something, usually from childhood or whatnot. And it goes over time and that becomes a pattern. And that's the cause of like so much more pain than we think. Even stuff like herniated disc, which look good on the x-ray, it's like, wow, they're hurt. He has so many examples. People they have no pain. So you can have the structural problem and have no pain. And so there's a whole health field out there making gazillions of unnecessary things when you would think the first thing you would test, that's what Michael Yang said, because he deals with people with pain. You think the first thing you would deal with was what's the thing that can do no harm? Well, maybe a little bit of therapy. How about that? That's going to do the least damage before putting people and doing all this stuff. But they're glad to do this stuff, right? Because there's cash there. So that to me is really fascinating.
This is a really interesting loop because it's I think that there's also a role for the adrenal system. I keep coming back to the adrenal system, but we know that, if you've got cortisol that's out of control, if it's really high and then you go through a burnout phase where you can't keep up with the demand, that it makes you burn through those mediators of pain, such as serotonin and dopamine. So I feel like, if you look at someone with low cortisol, they have a much higher rate of fibromyalgia and having certain pain syndromes. They also have a higher rate of post-traumatic stress disorder. I want to take some of these ideas, you're kind of applying them with John Sarno's work and pain. I wonder if you could walk us through applying some of these ideas of the power of negative thinking to weight loss. You happen to be pretty knowledgeable about weight loss. How do you approach it for someone who's struggling with weight loss? Is that repression? Is it, what do you think of there?
Okay, that's the whole thing. Because I've dealt on the mind side and on the supplement side. So it's so complicated. I mean, that's the thing. So I don't want to talk out of line. I kind of have wild ideas, but I don't know.
We want to hear the wild ideas.
I don't know. Well, I mean, I think some of it is what's your goal. I mean, so in our culture, it's aesthetic, right? And the aesthetic reasons I don't think are enough. But that's generally why people do them. So I think that's why people fall off the wagon. It's kind of my knee-jerk response to that. And of course, again, I think a lot of it, like you said, is hormonal, big time, and so many different variables. On the mindset side, I think, and there's also like a lot of research on the secondary gain. A lot of people gain weight to not be hit on. A lot of women with trauma in the past related to that, they gain weight to not be sexual. They don't want to be sexual. So many different variables that hit that, about whether somebody's got to stick to a plan. And then, do they care? I mean, do you really care if you want to be? And is it weight or health is also the big thing. I think if people started thinking about health instead of weight, it'd be easier over the long term to do something, to really tie it to experience as opposed to looking good. But although there's also the evolutionary part about, like, if you're not married and you haven't reproduced, that's very powerful, right? Looking good. And that also fits social. It's just too much stuff there. And then on the cortisol and the adrenals, it's just not something I'm that deep into. I kind of know what I know, but that's not something I haven't spent enough time on that to have much of an opinion. I do think what's weird is that even with all that said, because weight loss is so much more complicated than pain in a sense, because pain you want to get out of, and it's less variable. There are a lot of variables. Like, they've studied Sarno stuff, back to him. I mean, he's having like a 77% success rate on one, and on one independent study, an 88% success rate on another, and then they did a giant one and he got 54. Well, even 54, let's just say half, 1 out of 2 people. These people they only go to, and the cool thing is they only go to get TMS treatment, what he's doing. These are the people that had everything. So this is the worst sample you could possibly have, right? And so if Sarno does it himself, you're looking at 77 88. When you start doing it with other doctors, you're down to 54. But compare that to anything. Compare that to
It's
surgery.
stunningly
Compare that to
good.
pills. Yeah. So then, if you want to add the adrenals and the cortisol to that, right? So if you were to, let's say you were to start combining stuff, right? Well, how much more successful could you be? I don't know, right? So if you were to start combining modalities, which combining modalities is awesome because you can get better results. The problem is, what do you attribute the success to? Like, is this repression causing the adrenal problems? Like, is there such a fight going on by repressing that's causing the adrenal fatigue? Like, who knows? Which is kind of, it's fascinating.
We get a lot of patients in our clinics with back pain, and a lot of them will walk in, with Sarno's book and be like, hey, I think this is all in my head, and I'll look at their MRI and be like, ooh, it's also in your back, but let's, but 1 in 2 lumbar surgeries also fails or goes back in 5 years, and that's something that you can't undo. So, my stance on that is like, yeah, man, go, check it out. Work it out, and there's a lot of studies that, can be done, but, it's kind of a free roll so long as you, aren't writhing in pain and suicidal with it, to try that first. And a lot of people do get better. It's really effective.
It's hard to study that stuff. Like when I was publishing Therapeutic Hypnosis, I mean, there's studies, but this to control out, because a lot of it's the personality of the therapist or the tailored hypnosis. But when you want to control and you have to use a CD or whatever, it's just not the same, right? So it's really hard on the psychosomatic stuff to really get the data that that you can be confident in.
Right. It's very hard to define the control and have it be robust so that you're not folding in placebo effect and these other pieces that are harder to measure outside of a randomized trial.
It is placebo effect. That's the thing. Well, it's actually more on the TMS Sarno, because people say placebo and they just say what but what is that, right? And then TMS is more than placebo, because that's really what Sarno's doing is dynamic psychotherapy. I mean, it's Freud. It's like dynamic psychotherapy is this fast Freud analysis. So instead of staying on the couch, it's a speed up Freud, because that's where it's at, and it works for that, which is crazy. And there's just not enough therapists out there who understand Sarno too. So they'll go somewhere and they, like they go to you. Well, it might be in my head, but then are you equipped to deal with it? Like, what do you tell them?
Mm-hmm. You better have a good referral.
You have a good referral for them, and a lot of people just read the book and get better, which is crazy. Mm-hmm. Like that Stossel guy, that journalist, like he just read the book and got better, and that's why he became such a big fan. Because a lot of people just knowing it, I don't think they have the depth of the issue. Also, placebo is really cool. Like, there's some new stuff I just read on the placebo, and I'll find you his name later. But so all these alternative treatments, there's a million of them, right? Homeopathy and stuff. Which really, if you look at homeopathy, I mean, there's no data. That's a sugar pill. It's not happening. But they seem to work, right? For some people, and and it's never versus a placebo. But what is that, right? Is what people are wondering. Like, there's really not a lot of research. So this one guy, he's a evolutionary psychologist, started working with the other guys, and his theory out there is pretty compelling. And what he's saying is that it's just permission, right? So if you look at animals, like rats, for example, if rats get sick in the winter, they'll stay sick longer. Like, an animal can cure itself, right? A mammal can cure itself. We pretty much have the stuff. But back in the day, we have lots of food now, right? We have lots of resources. So back in the day, it was very limited resources for even humans back then. So it's all about conserving energy to stay alive. So you get sick. Now it's a big cost of energy to say, okay, I'm going to fight this, get better. I'm going to get over this thing. So you had to gauge, whether it's the right time to get better, or it's just, let's just lay low, I'll stay sick, not taking the resources, and when the time's right, I'll come out. Now, being very social creatures, humans, like not rats, we look for our peers to tell us when it's okay to get better. So the theory is that when the doctor says, yeah, take this, it's okay to get better, that's what's working. So we had it in us all along. It's like a movie. But it's just saying, okay, it's safe out there, you're cool, get better. It's really, really, really cool, and they've done some cool studies with that. Like I can pull those up, which is fascinating. And they've done it with rats. Well, they'll just change the lighting in the lab to whether it's summer, or winter. And obviously the getting's good in the summer for a rat. Like, you better stop getting sick. It's time to get some fucking food. Go get food. But it's winter. Like, it's not really. It's better just to stay sick and hang out till summer, right? So That's really, really cool if you start to think about that. That's new stuff and really neat. So when you start to combine this kind of healing modalities with the positive, negative, with the repression, with the evolutionary reason why we might get well, it's pretty neat. And I don't know this solution, based on that, but that's to me, where the fun is reading it, kind of going wide and seeing if something can come out of it.
Yeah, I really like that. I love that work you're describing about permission. I think we're going to have to send that out to our listeners to understand that better, because Pedram, I'm going to speak for myself here, but I feel like as a physician, I could leverage permission more in my work. Like if that's really going to be one of the ways that you help people turn the corner when it comes to weight loss or dealing with pain or, whatever it is that you're up against. I want to understand that. Like, how do I bring that into my bag of tricks? My ways of really helping people stop that private suffering.
I'm gonna make a confession here, in that as I've gotten busier and busier over at well.org, I've had very limited time for clinical encounters, and so the way I deal with my first encounter with a new patient is effectively just giving them permission and giving them a couple lifestyle hacks. Sending off for some labs and stuff like that, because it takes a while for some data to come back, and then just watching to see how much better they are by their second visit, just by giving them the permission, the power of placebo in that way, and also just empowering them to do a couple things to help themselves. And I'd say 60% of them are markedly better by their second visit anyways, which helps me not have that many people to need to help. And then from there, then we just kind of drill in and go. But yeah, I mean, it's just been kind of how I run clinical practice and give them the power back. It's been wonderful. It's been fun to watch.
So Pedram, I want to challenge you to do it for our listeners right now. I mean, this is kind of cool because you have gotten busier and busier at well.org. It's harder to get in and see you as a clinician. So can you do it for our listeners right now? Like, what does that look like to give them permission?
Yeah, absolutely. So whatever it is, you guys, that you're dealing with, start looking at what you're eating and what could be contributing to that problem. Are you getting enough sleep? There's all this wonderful stuff coming out on sleep and what it does and how it, detoxes the body. If you're not getting enough sleep, your body doesn't stand a fighting chance. And so what can you do to change your sleep? Are you moving around enough? Are you exercising? And how are you dealing with stress? And so, we just kind of take a global view at all of those kind of big lifestyle things and say, okay, what can you do right now to clean up each of those categories? And in doing so, let's just take a baseline of what your symptoms are, whatever you are suffering with. Let's take a baseline right now. And if it's, activities of daily living, if it's a pain scale, if it's, bloating or bowel movements or whatever it is, take a baseline and then start making, one or two changes in each of those categories and see how you feel in a week, right? And just from that, you will find that there is so much movement in your life. There will be so much movement from you stepping in and captaining your own ship again, because a lot of what's happened in health, and look, we're all, we're in the business, and there's books I've read that my patients haven't, right? There's this thing called school that has specialized knowledge, but the personal responsibility in your health is what's been missing in the broken medical system, and you kind of being a stakeholder in your health. And what people do is they walk in and be like, oh my God, I've been to everybody, I heard you're good, fix it, right? And that person doesn't get better, right? You have to have some ownership in there. And so for you guys listening right now, whatever it is that you're ailing with, you know what you probably ought to be doing to get better. And there's a lot of people that are like, look, I've tried everything and it hasn't helped. Yes, that's what doctors are for. And you now have permission to start doing the little things and at least doing your part. But I promise you, without being a stakeholder, the doctor's not going to be able to fix anything. And you're going to doctor shop and you're going to complain about those guys that didn't help you, and you're going to go from one person to another, and it's just going to be another 2 years of your life until someone gives you permission. So here we are giving you permission right now. Get on it.
Boom. I love this. Yeah. So, Michael, anything you would add based on what you know about the data on permission?
I'd say that people just have to understand that, we grew up in scarcity. We evolved in scarcity, and so it made sense to stay sick or stay in pain at certain times. And now just kind of notice that in yourself, that that's kind of the program running, and that now we have total abundance. So it's okay to get well. So you have indoor plumbing, we have heat, most of us, I mean, we can control the heat in our house. We have plenty of food. We've got plenty of nutrients out there, right? So it's okay to go ahead and use that resource, use all that energy you have. It's okay because you can just eat more, and just know that the reason why you're not, maybe, is that your body is like, well, what if I don't have the nutrients to power this healing experience? So you got plenty of nutrients to do it. It's safe. It's okay. You have it in you and you can do it, and you're not gonna run out of food. Because that's really what it's all about. So dude, I would add that.
I see a new weight loss method being birthed right now. It's like, wait, I got a bunch of extra food actually sitting on my hips. Can I use that?
Right, exactly. We got plenty of the nutrient. That's not our problem anymore. But again, and I know the paleo guys preach this all the time on the nutrition, and again, there's also weirdness there. But as a general rule, a lot of it can be traced back if you just study revolutionary psychology and neurology. It's pretty predictable and reliable when you start doing the research on it. So stuff's neat.
Fantastic.
Good stuff. So, Michael, for people who want to learn more about you, where do they go?
I don't know. For this kind of talk, there's nowhere. I mean, I'm like the supplement company, I'm kind of behind the scenes. I'm involved in formulation and marketing, but that's really Dr. Steve, and so it's a different voice. And again, I'm proud of that company, but that's a different thing than we're talking about. I'm not really right now blogging or doing anything. This is kind of what I like to do, and I apply some of these ideas maybe to marketing or not really formulation, but just to keep myself sane. But right now, there's really nowhere. I didn't really come with a thing to promote. I might sometime. Well, maybe if Michael Yang will have me, I'd like to do a podcast with that guy, so everything I've just said, he actually understands about 10 times more in depth than I do. Which is, again, I want to qualify myself. I'm in it, but I'm not. I talk to a lot of smart people, but I'm a synthesizer, but I'm not as deep as a lot of people. Like your Pedram's best friend, for example, what I was talking about, he actually knows it like 4 levels deep. So maybe I'll get with him and be his sidekick if he'll have me. That would be fun.
Please do that.
Because he talks about this. Yeah, we need to do.
Let's call that dude out.
Yes, I might. Maybe, hopefully, I'll be Michael Yang's sidekick, and then we could talk about this all the time. That would be my dream there, because he actually knows so much more, and he sees people. Like, you got to know, I don't see patients. That's why I have all this time to read books about all this stuff. So I'm not seeing people. I'm not a clinician. I'd be a terrible clinician because I'm too impatient. I'm just not patient enough to see it through.
So Sarah, let's do it. Dr. Michael. Yeah, Dr. Michael Yang. We're calling you out. You need to start a podcast with Mike Lovitch.
Exactly. This is what this is all about. We're calling out Mike Yang to do a podcast, and if you want to hear more about this, then I'll be his sidekick, and you can listen to it all day. So he just has to get off his ass and do it.
Yeah, and he's one of those guys that reads.
We're not just calling him out. We're actually giving him permission. Like, it's time, Michael Yang.
It's time for Mike Yang.
Yes. All right, guys, we got to get off. Mike, so great to see you, man. We'll be in Boulder, next week? In a week or so, I'll be hanging with this guy in Boulder, getting into some trouble.
Lots of non-healthy things. We're going to be very social.
Hey, I'm bringing the wife and the baby, so you got to spare me.
All right.
Awesome, guys. This is the Health Bridge. We'll catch you next time, and go to the Facebook page, and we'll post some of the resources that Mike was talking about. Facebook.com/The Health Bridge.
Yeah, thank you so much, Michael Lovitch. Great to have you.
No, thanks for having me. It's fun.